Welcome back folks, my name's Shane. In today's video we're checking out the 7 Artisans 50mm f1.8 autofocus prime lens for the L mount. That's right, I'm using this lens right now on the Lumix S9 and this is how it looks. Now, rather than just do the same old lens tests everyone else does, I'm going to do some A/B comparisons with the 50mm f1.8 from Lumix on a separate Lumix S9. So you'll see some side-by-side comparisons in this video to see whether or not the price is worth the difference between both of these lenses, both positively or negatively. So that's what this review video will be all about. Once we get back to the studio though, I'm going to give you my final thoughts and talk a little bit about how this lens performs up against the Lumix S Series Prime. Before we get into this video, just a quick disclaimer, 7 Artisans have sent this lens out for this particular video. They don't know what kind of video I'm putting together, nor do they get to influence it in any way. So all thoughts will be my own. The reason it says paid promotion somewhere is they did send this out for this particular video. If you do find it helpful, leave a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe, click the bell, all that kind of stuff. And if you want to check this out, I'll link it in the description box. Here we go. Before we get into the specs, let's do a quick blind test between both of these lenses on 2 Lumix S9s running identical settings. So you can make your mind up whether or not you can see a huge difference between the color, contrast, autofocus performance, and all that kind of stuff. Let us know what you think and which one is performing better. So the one on this side right now, over here, this is the 7 Artisans lens, and this is the Lumix S Series Prime. Let's cover this lens and what you need to know about it. So this is a 50mm f1.8 prime with full autofocus support, obviously. Now the great news is, if you like to shoot manual focus, there's an autofocus manual focus switch on the side. And this also ties into the linear focusing options found in the modern Lumix camera. So you can pull focus repeatably and reliably. This is the first third-party lens I've tested that actually has access to these features, which is fantastic. So not only is it an autofocus lens, but there's no handicaps when it comes to using this on a Lumix body. The focus ring itself feels amazing under the fingers. It actually feels better than the S Series Prime that I'm shooting this shot with. So yeah, the metal knurling on here really feels premium. We get a nice fluid experience on the aperture ring here, which goes from f1.8 down to f16, or you can lock it into automatic. Just know there's no clicked mode on this. It just has a smooth aperture ring only. If you like to control the aperture via the camera here, the automatic option has a soft lock on it, which is nice. The autofocus manual focus switch feels great. It's maybe not the most high tension switch I've ever used, but it still feels good and I have no complaints. We get a minimum focusing distance of 0.5 meters with this, which is great. And it also has a 62mm front filter thread. Included in the box, we get a front and rear lens cap, and there's also a USB cable, which allows you to update the firmware. Now the firmware port is just on the back of the lens here, and you can hook it up to a computer. It will pop up as a drive and you can drop the new firmware into that drive, and then the lens is updated. It's nice and simple. Having an f1.8 lens really opens up opportunities to create a lot of subject separation if that's important for you, or of course if you want to shoot in low light for both photos or video, you're going to get great results out of this. Man, there's a lot of flies today. Killing me.
Here's a quick look at the bokeh ball quality. As you can see, there's a lot of cat's eyeing going on. In the center of the frame, it looks a lot more circular. I don't have a problem with this personally, but it's all subjective. In this test, I'm stopping down from f2.8 all the way down to f11, and the Sunstar effect really kicks in around f8, and it looks okay, but there is quite a bit of flaring on screen. But again, I don't consider this to be any sort of deal breaker.
All right, let's do some isolated autofocus tests now. I'm just going to do a few different tests to before just to see how it performs, and I'll really try my best now to give it some stuff to work with that's a little more complex than what you saw before. So if you're using human tracking, these are the kind of results you can get. It looks, at least on the LCD screen, like it's doing a pretty great job so far, but I'll know more when I watch it back. But so far, this appears to be pretty solid when it comes to human detection. Let's check for focus breathing, and this is how much the frame will zoom in and out when it pulls focus to minimum focus or nearabouts, right? So as I move this rock right into the center where I've got the autofocus point, you can definitely see some focus breathing on the sides of frame. Let's try the Lumix. And over to the Lumix f1.8. This actually looks a little more snappy in terms of its autofocus performance as well, but it's pretty similar. Let's go back to the 7 Artisans and back to the 7 Artisans. So this has almost like a smoother focus pull. It's a little bit more cinematic looking at the expense of it not being quite as fast. So yeah, depending on what you need, both of these will do the job.
Before we go out and shoot some photos, I just want to talk about my original experience with the Sony E-mount version of this about a year or so ago.
It was a lens I didn't recommend, and I said it was only good for beginners on a serious budget because of the build quality. It's a hard lens to recommend. Now, all those flaws have been addressed with this particular model. The focus ring feels amazing. It feels every bit as good or better than the Panasonic S-Series Prime over here, so that's not a problem. On the prior version and review, I could barely turn it, which was pretty tough. The aperture ring didn't feel anywhere near as nice as this either, and the lens was physically loose in the mount on my Sony cameras, and it was just not very good to use. I think maybe the biggest problem I had was if you breathed on the autofocus manual focus switch, it would switch positions. Now, it's actually a switch that works. So well done, 7 Artisans, for fixing these critiques. I gave you my honest opinion on the last video, and it was a lens I didn't end up keeping, but this is a much better built lens now than it was on my initial review. So if you're wondering whether or not you've seen me actually with one of these in my hand at some point in time, yes, I tested it for Sony E-mount. Looking at the video samples and side-by-sides, I think the image quality out of this holds up very favorably with that of the S-Series Prime, but let us know what you think. All right, let's get out of the studio and into the field. So let's take a few shots here at this little waterway area here, and I'm using the S9 with the 50mm f1.8 and a polarizing filter. I manually focused all the way in at 0.5 meters, and here's the result. The railing here gives us a good opportunity to check out how much chroma this lens has, and I can only see a little bit of green fringing up on the top left-hand side. One of the fun things about an f1.8 full-frame lens is you can still create really nice subject separation even at a distance. I dig it. One thing I have noticed with the autofocus performance, at least with this camera body, is I have to make the one area box kind of small if something's really close to the lens. At a distance it's fine, but up close I need to make the one area box almost as small as I can. Let's check out a few different apertures here. This is f1.8, f5.6, it's looking nice and sharp, f11, and f16. Now, if you're a video shooter, you'll love the fact this lens is fully compatible with the E-stabilization on the S9 or any other camera that supports it. So this is great. I can turn it from standard to high. I can also use the Boost IS mode, which locks it off like on a tripod. This is awesome. The character of the background blur can be seen in these two shots. It almost looks like an oil painting, so it's not quite super busy and it's not quite super smooth. It's somewhere in the middle, which kind of reminds me a little bit of an oil painting. Here's a shot at f4, and it looks mighty sharp. Take a look. Now, I'm really enjoying shooting with the rule of thirds, so I've got the grid lines on screen. It's just something I've started doing recently. While I use it for video from time to time, it's actually been really fun to frame up some of these shots, these very basic shots with that grid line on. These two photos were shot using crop zoom, which punches in all the way up to 154mm. Animal detection is also very reliable. You'll see a yellow box come up as per always, and you can take your photo. Here's maybe the most random scene of the day. There's a whole bunch of frogs hanging out in a yard. So I took some shots. I still had animal detection autofocus enabled, and it found the frogs no problems at all, even these statues. So yeah, no problems when it comes to AF. Maybe the star of the show today is this aperture ring. It feels so good. It's nice and smooth, but it has the right amount of tension. And while I'm not breaking any new ground with these photos, I love the fact I can set it to f1.8 and get lots of subject separation even at a distance. Beautiful. Here's another quick look at minimum focus at f1.8. And now I've stopped it down to f2.8. Both shots look nice and clean. Now, I accidentally left crop zoom on for this next photo. I've never seen a fish this big in the pond until today. So yeah, there you go. This was at least 50 centimeters. If you like to shoot landscapes, I'll stop this one down to f8. As you can see, everything's in focus. Minus the big bag of poop off to the right hand side here, I'm actually pretty impressed with how well this renders the scene. So let us know what you think of the image quality. Again, these are all straight out of camera JPEGs.
This is definitely not as reliable with continuous autofocus for photography as the Lumix lens. This had a much lower hit rate than I was anticipating given how positive the rest of the experience has been. So yeah, just keep that in mind if you like to shoot burst photography. I hope you enjoyed that little photography section. Let us know what you think, and if you want to see more like that, just let us know. We're going to wrap this up and talk about the 7 Artisans 50mm f1.8 prime for the L mount. This lens is great. It's the exact opposite experience I had with the Sony E-mount version about a year or so ago. So well done, 7 Artisans, for fixing all the bugs. I think on my original review of the Sony version of this, there was some weird mechanical buzz or rattle going on within the lens when you were using autofocus. That doesn't exist anymore. All of the complaints I had with the original one have been addressed with this. I think my only critique would come down to the continuous autofocus for photography. And in those burst tests, you could see that the 7 Artisans did lose me at that middle ground sort of spot, which is exactly what happened on the Sony one as well. But if you can live with that, I think this is a great lens if you're looking for a budget travel nifty 50 or something that can do portraits. This is a great lens now for the L mount. Now, I don't have the original one anymore. I did get rid of it, but I would have no problems recommending this for L mount based on my experience with this. So well done, 7 Artisans. Thanks for watching. My name's Shane. If you want to check this out, I'll link it below. Catch you soon.